How you doing, everybody? This is Phil with NYRockstv. We're at the National 9/11 Museum right here downtown, and we're here with no other than a first responder with transit. His name is Grande, a great friend of mine, grew up with, and we're here with Dylan. Dylan, what's your title with the 9/11 Museum?
I am the curatorial assistant here at the National 9/11 Museum.
Okay. Now, transit just got recognized in the 9/11 Museum, and they've been inducted into the museum as part of it. It took 22 years, but finally transit is in the museum.
That's correct. Thank you very much, Phil, for introducing me and being part of the whole experience here at the 9/11 National Museum. I am very grateful for this opportunity and for the people involved. I am just one of thousands of people and individual stories, as you understand. Just recently, New York City Transit Authority, MTA, TW Local 100 was inducted into the National Museum. We are very grateful to the museum in showcasing our efforts in the 9/11 aftermath of September 11th.
Now, you were a plumber, right? Correct? The transit? You were
That's
underneath.
correct. That's correct.
You were underneath the lot and on top.
The site itself is the World Trade Center site, but it actually backlogs as far as Canal Street east and west. So when you understand the site is massive, but it's actually contained to the Trade Center, is what mostly a lot of people explain about. But the transit system isn't just underneath the Trade Center, it's city/state. So to get a better understanding of what we're involved, it's a small snapshot of basically unrolling a set of blueprints.
All right. So now you're going to have a discussion with Dylan. You're going to tell the exact story of what happened, what led up to it, and all the extra lobbying you were doing with transit, going down to Washington for the Zeroga bill, right?
Yes, that's a high honor as well. I thank you for bringing that up. Again, it's a very raw emotion that comes with it, and to explain, you cannot explain this in 2 minutes.
Right.
It's just massive, and what I explained is what I was involved in, and what New York City Transit was involved in, and what I was part of, and other thousands of other heroes that was there.
Right.
But I can explain what I was involved in.
Your story. We're going to tell your story. So the fight is not over because there's so many things and there's so many different agencies that were down there. That's why it took so long to get the transit in here, because there were so many different agencies that were part of 9/11 on September 11th. So you guys finally got into the museum, so it's going to take time for other things to happen too, besides your agency. There's other agencies, and all this takes a little bit of time.
The other agencies, basically, it's what the museum does is it showcases a snapshot in time of what people were doing, and it's showcasing like a book. Every agency is like a chapter. If you understand the chapter with each agency, and then go into the chapters and sub-chapters and sub-sub-chapters,
Right.
you can understand in each book, and then eventually you have an encyclopedia. And then that showcases what the emergency response actually was. What I've always explained was, once those buildings were hit, the United States of America was at war, and every United States of America sent in the best of the best to find possible survivors. The number 1200 in my head was explained to me in the very beginning, afterwards from my supervisor, Brian Lane, that there was possible 1,200 survivors, and so that's the number that always resonates in my brain. I can never understand how many people perished, but that's the number ingrained in my brain.
Okay. With that, we're going to sit down now. We've got a lot of photographs that you personally took. We're going to show them later, but right now we're going to sit down with Dylan. And Alan, thank you very much for your efforts.
Thank you.
Everything you did for first responders.
Thank you for what you did.
And thank you for having me, and thank you for your efforts having us down the airport. So we're gonna listen to the interview right now with Dylan and tell me your story. Thank you very much.
So I'm Dylan Williams. I'm the curatorial assistant here at the 9/11 Museum.
My name's Grande, a September 11 first responder to the World Trade Center site. I was a plumber with New York City Transit Authority. Thank you very much for the interview.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your help. This is a very emotional story. It's a very emotional story, and then what happens is on that they're very much in the details. Today what happens is we're here at the 9/11 Museum, and we're here to discuss a lot of details.
Absolutely.
First and foremost, this particular album was given to me by Carmine Labasco. These are the individual photographs that he photographed in the interim of September 11th that showcased from 14th Street and 6th Avenue, and you'll see multiple photographs in this interview, in this photograph book. Photograph book. Today, this particular shirt was given to me. Three were given to me by Tommy Hayes from the electrical lighting division. This is one of three that I had from New York City Transit Authority. Over the years of advocating with the John Field Foundation, over years and back and forth, I was advocating on behalf of myself and also New York City Transit Authority and also TW Local 100. This here showcases recovery and restore.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of things what we're involved in. So here is what the back states,
Yeah.
Ground Zero. And so I would go to the downtown Marriott Hotel and pretty much explaining our relationships, what we were involved in with the New York City Transit Authority. Also, this was one of the other pins that I would like to donate with my medallion. That's the lapel pin,
Yeah.
which also I donated the medallion.
The middle. Yeah.
Right,
Exactly.
so this is the lapel pin that you saw at the ceremony on the museum.
Absolutely.
So this is the second one that I would like to donate.
Thank you.
And this is the third one I would like to donate.
Wow. Thank you so much. Wow. This is the Office of Emergency Management pass you received.
That
September
specific
13th.
that specific badge I had to I was explained by my supervisor Steve Natowitz to go and get that specific badge. I had to go to Chambers Street and West Street, and there was a military checkpoint signed in because it was explained to me that if you didn't have that badge, you could be shot for looting underneath.
Wow.
It was that severe.
serious, yeah.
Very serious stuff was going on, and America sent in the best.
Yeah.
And so there was just thousands of people engaged in a lot of stuff as far as trying to find people that were perished. And that was the focus. And New York City Transit Authority was coming in from all angles in the tunnels. Up above, below, and that's what we were focused on. I was deployed to City Hall. So in the very beginning of this. But this is a snapshot of what we were involved in.
Everything. Yeah.
This here is, as I was saying, I would like to donate as well, but this explains the red badge.
That's yeah.
This
Wow.
this explains the red badge, and on the red badge it says exactly, and these are all the agencies that were there. So when you say first responder, this is all the agencies that were there, and also the private sector that was there. So this is what was given to me, a copy, to get that red badge.
So that came with the badge.
So that's, and I had it notarized recently, not that long ago. So, and if you read the top of it, it's the downtown site security policy.
Right.
So this is the beginning of a lot of things that people were involved in. Also, these are the initial memorandums from when I was with Transit, and these are the cleanup sites, what we were engaged in, New York City Transit Authority. So this shows the day effective is September 12th, 2001. So this is what, it was a state of emergency and what we were involved in.
Right.
And so all of these are on the list of the priorities of what to be fixed, and that's how fast transit was on scene. We were actually coming from the outskirts coming in. And so this is the beginning snapshots of what was going on.
What you were doing.
So I saved all of these purposely knowing, and document it, because it was told to me by my friend Carmine Labasco to document, which I did. And I was a junior plumber on the seniority list, and starts a whole nother conversation. So also here is the security end of what they were explaining to you, all concerned by my superintendent, procedures for the emergency response tool.
Sure.
These are your procedures you had to follow for your vests and everything. And so then these are also the another one with that. I think I got copies of that, and that's on November 7th. So that's November 7th, September.
Okay.
And so those are two copies.
Sure.
But these are the very beginning of the snapshot of what transit was involved in the very beginning in the aftermath. And so explaining the story, you have to go backwards to go forwards, and then actually go from the past to the future.
Right.
So now we're already in the future, but you have to go back to the past.
Right.
So, and before 9/11, we were in a different world. After 9/11, we were in a completely different world. So these are the different things, and for me personally, it's like watching a movie.
Right.
You can turn it off, I can't.
Right.
So, and all the details are in the details, and what happens is on the extreme day going forward, all of these details are very important to explain what we were involved in. So I can explain what I was involved in, what I was asked to do, and what I wasn't asked to do. So because of what I was involved in.
Absolutely. And I just want to say thank you again, Alan, for being here, for sharing these stories, these artifacts, these very personal. Obviously, 22 years later, still you feel like you're there on the day of still. And I'm glad you brought up, to tell the story, we do have to go backwards and then go forwards. And, it's an ongoing story because, people are still very much affected by the work that they did down here because of health effects or, because of mental health effects or what have you. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about just how you got into your work with the MTA. Did you start off as a plumber for the MTA, or did that?
My whole life I've been a plumber.
Okay.
It's actually very young age starting up.
Really?
And my mother's sister's husband had a plumbing company.
Oh.
And so I started there, and then followed through with other friends and associates, and started work on Richmond Plumbing on Staten Island.
Oh, wow.
And I was involved in a lot of plumbing work as far as residential and high-rise. I got into high-rise work and into the Plumbers Union, United Association.
Oh, wow.
I also was a union plumber. I also worked for Home Depot in a short time before September 11th. And before September 11th, I was one person asked to represent Home Depot in what they call was Operation Santa Claus. And Operation Santa Claus, what that was all about was giving back to the communities and for disability children. And so Home Depot, I was only working for Home Depot 1 year.
Wow.
And so they asked me, the store trainer in Secaucus, Doug Riddick, asked me to help with that. And so we did. Long story with that. The second day of the first day we set up the event. The second day they actually asked me, the store manager, and the district store manager, Mark Lodi, Mark Smith, to be on board. And they had the plane. I got to the back of the airport. They shuttled me on board the plane. I got on the plane rolled up, Santa Claus was on the plane.
Wow.
So that was called Operation Santa Claus.
That's great.
So that was in my humbling way of understanding a bigger picture.
Right.
In learning from disabilities and handicaps, and everybody has a story. And so stepping back and listening to their story, you can get a better education and a feel for life.
Absolutely.
And so the next year we did the same thing. And so that started my networking and understanding in different points of view with Home Depot and giving back. So that's what brings me here as well, is giving back.
Thank you. Yeah.
And so that's the bigger picture, is because after September 11th, what happened was the morning of September 11th, that particular morning, I was on my way to the Staten Island Home Depot. And that particular morning, September 11th, I heard over the radio, it came over the radio, the Trade Center was hit. I was going to the Home Depot on Forest Avenue. I walked in, I spoke to the assistant store manager, Brad, who I knew from transit, I knew from Home Depot, and from the Home Depot. So once I spoke to him, I said that the Trade Center was hit, go in the back and listen on TV. So I then bought a few articles because I was doing some yard signs for the borough president, James Molinaro, putting up signs. So that particular day, as you know, they stopped elections.
Right.
So from that, I went home to my parents' house in Eltingville. I saw on a TV. I said to my father, my father was in the United States Navy, submarines. Submarine he served on is USS Pacuna, 319. That's a museum down in Philadelphia today, Penn's Landing. So I come from a military family. Then, as I was explaining to my father that building's going down, the building went down, and then I noticed Mayor Giuliani come on the TV and say, all emergency personnel report to work. I then looked at my dad, I kissed my dad, I said, Dad, I gotta go. I then walked a mile to the Eltonville train station. I saw the train coming in on the other side going towards Townsville. I waved that badge to the motorman. I got into the train with the motorman. He went to Townsville. The train then went express to the ferry. When the train went express to the ferry, I met a gentleman that controlled train traffic down at the ferry. The gentleman, I forget his name at the moment, but he was controlling train traffic down at Bowling Green. So we went on the ferry, got to Lower Manhattan, got into South Ferry, the 109 train, went downstairs, what they call the tower. It's a train enclosure. The train station's completely different now. So we went downstairs, and that's when the antenna was cut off. So what happened was when we went to I tried to make a phone call to my recording quarters, couldn't get any radio confirmation. There was no radio conference. So the gentleman and I walked up to Bowling Green train station. So we walked in, and then at that point, I walked into the tower enclosure again, which is a glass enclosure, and that's where they control train traffic.
And that's below grade.
That's below grade.
Okay.
So it's on a platform. And so him and I went over there, and then when we went over there, the superintendent said, I said, I'd like to call my reporting quarters. I recalled my reporting quarters. I spoke to Kenny Blau, the day supervisor. I explained to him where I was. He said, get your rest, everything's unfolding, go home. And so we don't know exactly what we're going to do. Just go home, get your rest, because you're going to need it. You need rest. So I then...
May I stop you really quick?
Yes.
Just a question. So this is 9/11, the
Yes,
day of.
the day of.
The day of. Did you get close to the site itself?
I was just about to. So with that, I then signed. I signed in the tower enclosure because the superintendent said sign this book. So that's what they do, is they always sign the login book. There's a login book at the tower. So I signed in on the log book. I cannot remember, it's somewhere around 12-ish. So 12, approximately 12-ish. So after I signed that log book, I then turned around and I walked down and up as far as Broadway because I know the streets. I stood in the streets. I walked up as far as the Bull. Now, at that point, it was like walking into a cloud. I walked in, and I walked in probably about 15, 20 steps. I could not see anything. I turned around. I was in the cloud. I turned around. And so my eyes were burning. I turned around. I then got back on the Staten Island ferry again. And so then at that point, I got back, and then I made the phone call to the borough president, James Molinaro, campaign manager, Mario Bruno, who I explained to him, what are we doing today? He says, we don't know at this point, stay close. I got it. I knew what he said. That particular ended that story for the day. Then going the night for the 12th for the 13th. The 12th for the 13th, the 12th, I went in because I didn't know how the day would progress. So first of all, obviously, how do you get to the city from Staten Island?
Right.
Excuse me. So the day of going in, so I left very early. Approximately about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening, I took the 79 bus from Staten Island down Richmond Avenue, straight across to Brooklyn. I changed over to one of the trains, the NYR, I can't remember exactly which one. I took that to 9th Street. I took the F train then to St. Patrick's Cathedral. And then at that point, it was probably about 7, 8 o'clock in the evening. And so 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the evening, what happened was at that point, I wanted to say a prayer. I could not, the front doors were closed. I was praying the whole step of the way, and it was an eerie feeling. The black cloud, everything was over. It was astronomical. So then at that point, I then walked across the 7th Avenue, down to 42nd Street, over to 6th Avenue, and then at 6th Avenue and 42nd Street, there was massive people running. Massive people were running back up, and I spoke to a police officer. I said, "What's the problem?" I said, and I showed him this badge. I said, "I'm emergency response, New York City Transit Authority. I'm going down to 14th Street." He said, "Go over to 10th Avenue, 9th or 10th Avenue." I'm having a little fuzzy, 9th or 10th, I can't remember. So he said, "Go over to that side and go down." I said, "What's going on?" He said, "There was possibly, they're not sure, but possibly a bomb with the Empire State Building." So there was a lot of stuff going on at the moment simultaneously. So I said, okay. So I walked straight across 42nd Street all the way down, and then eventually at that time it was probably about 11:30 in the evening.
12th. Still on 12th.
In the evening on the 12th.
On the 12th. Okay.
In the evening, going because my starting time was 12 o'clock for the next day in the evening.
Oh, I see.
So
I
for
see
the
how that
following
works.
calendar day.
Okay, gotcha.
So for the following
so you
calendar.
technically start work on the 13th at midnight.
At midnight.
Okay, gotcha.
Actually, 12 to 8.
12 days, right?
12
That's your
to 8.
shift, right?
12 to 8.
Right,
That's
right.
correct.
Okay, got it.
So that at that point, I was downtown 14th and 6th, and I'm up above. I'm trying to figure out what do I do. So now I walk downstairs, and then when I walk downstairs, they were gathering information, and it was told to me that there was 2 miles of trucks. So I was waiting on the vac truck driver who came from 180th Street, David Ferragamo, who was my vac truck driver. And the purpose of the vac truck driver is a high-powered vehicle for the plumbers. On the front is a very big reel for actually clearing drains, and it's a high-powered water jet for drain cleaning. And so there's 2 tanks on the bottom. They're reservoir tanks, and in the back is a big vacuum.
Right.
So what it does is it does a lot of things for the plumbers, because you always have to worry about the third rail, because the third rail it'll energize with 600 volts.
Right.
So these are all the safety trainings that they teach you. So that when I did a safety conference back in 2002, and I spoke in front of approximately 300 people in one of the transit facilities, speaking about what I just mentioned. We called it complacency. And the bottom line with that was about the transit authority with the third rail and the water conditions. So this is what we were involved in. So that particular evening, after on the 13th going in, I waited for my vac truck to come. We had 2 miles of trucks going down to open the site. I was deployed with the first vac truck to go to City Hall. City Hall is where I was deployed to. So what that meant was we would open up the vent gratings, which the vent gratings, if you can understand a little bit mock demonstration, it's like if you were a kid with a ship in a bottle.
Right.
And a ship in a bottle and there's no air. Well, it's like a train and there's no air. So in the subways, it's a tunnel. So it moves air. So the airs have to get out somewhere. So that's where these vent gratings come into play.
Okay.
So, and at the bottom of those vent gratings are drains. So now in the subway, in the trains and the tracks and everything, all that, there are drains in those tracks, which goes into another part of the division, which is also ventilation and drainage. So these are massive pumps that pump the water out. So this starts the whole bigger picture of what we were involved in. So it's like if you snapped into what one person was, that you didn't get the whole picture.
Right.
So, and because it was so massive, as it was unfolding, we were coming in cleaning up. And that's what was going in. So as it was unfolding, they were coming in from more and more stations on the outskirts, cleaning. And then actually coming in and seeing what's working and what's not working and what's destroyed. And possibly finding possible survivors. And so that was the whole thing, was there was multiple things going on. It's like, if I could just say it in another way, it's like watching a concert. You see the person with the drums, but you don't see the person with the oboe. You don't see the person with the cymbals, but you see the person with the drums.
Right.
They all make music.
Yeah.
It's a concert,
Right.
and that's what went on.
Right.
All these agencies, everybody pulled together.
Absolutely.
Everybody pulled together. And it's not just one person. It's not just one person telling a story.
Right.
It's massive people. And so these are the biggest stories, and that's why I wanted to come forward to explain. So getting back to that particular night, I went to City Hall.
Can I ask one question, Alan? Just so I understand how it's just visualizing it. It sounds to me like at least for MTA's work, the station is closer to the central part of the site, closer to Ground Zero. People were moving in towards those last, if that makes sense. Like you were starting on the outskirts.
On
like
the
you said,
outskirts, coming
City
in,
Hall slowly
coming in,
moving closer
coming
to
in,
Ground Zero.
because
Right.
on the beginning of understanding, what happened was in the very beginning of the picture, on the 13th, transit had 2 miles of trucks going in.
Sure.
We opened the site up, opened up Broadway coming in, opening up so that all the other rigs could come in.
Right.
And all the transit had massive dump trucks,
Right.
massive grapplers, massive cranes,
Right.
and the lighting. So the lighting division was opening up the lighting, was providing lighting. Transit Authority had a pumping train coming in on a 109.
Wow.
Pumping the water out on a 109. So, and then getting back to the initial on the vents,
Yeah.
we were opening up the vent gratings. I would be one of many going into the vents, clearing them out, looking for possible pathological waste, and then cleaning them out. Transit carpenters would close them, and the other vac truck went to the stock market, did the same thing. So the stock market we were focused on the stock market. The dump trucks were coming in, open up the streets, and then on the first 3-day period, that's what was going on. So then from that, we were ordered out, but we never left.
Right.
It was a technical term, ordered out.
Right.
But we never left.
Right.
So because of the way it was unfolding. And so the fire could come back in to do rescue for the recovery, to find their personnel and find their brothers and sisters and everything, also with the police department and the Port Authority. So everybody was in as human beings looking for human beings. And so there was massive stuff going on simultaneously. And so what we were involved in, we'd come into tunnels, and through tunnels, all the tunnels, the train lines.
Okay.
So I walked the tunnels on the Rector on the south side coming in. I walked on a tunnel coming in on the north end coming in. That's where they built the wall, sealing the tunnels. On the end of the yard, that's where Cortland was. So all of this, I walked from south under the Rector entrance right down the block coming in.
Yeah.
I walked up to the bottom because on one night my supervisor, Brian Lane, John Mastromarino, and I walked in, and as we walked in, it was explained to me there would be a train there. Well, the train left because that's how they were getting rubble out.
Oh.
That was to my understanding.
train. Okay.
That was to my understanding.
Sure.
So that's why we went there.
Right.
But we missed the train.
Right.
So I walked up to the bottom of the rubble, and I touched it, as we all did.
Yeah.
So, and then at that point, that's where I get the raw emotions of hearing sounds of people. And these are the raw emotions that really echo and resonate in my brain. Because it was people that we were told we could get to, but we couldn't get to. So over time, I'm a lot better with that.
Sure.
But through echoes, that's what resonates in my brain. And so you heard people there. You heard cries for help. You know, you heard different things. So you don't know who was who. You know, you don't know if that was possible survivors. You don't know if that was possible rescue workers. You don't know. So these are all the ifs that I grapple with.
Of course.
And so at that time, my supervisor, Brian Lane, told me that the National Guard had heat seekers there. The heat seekers probably trying to find perished people. And so there was massive stuff going on simultaneously, getting back to that 1,200 number. That's all I know. So these are the initial things in the aftermath. So on the 13th and on the 14th and on the 15th, we were doing different things, but similar. And over time, coming in through tunnels. So my co-worker, Frank Ryan, he was with the ventilation and drainage. That's with the pumps. So the pumps then, it was explained to me on the subway with the tunnels, because the tunnels, when you saw about the the perimeter wall, the bathtub wall.
Oh, yeah, slurry wall.
It was explained to me that when you went down that ramp every year on the anniversary, there was 2 holes in the wall. You have a valve downstairs in the museum here that those were the water valves broken that were dumping into the tunnels.
Okay.
So it was to my understanding that Transit was testing the water content. When they were testing the water content, they found it to be potable, which is drinkable water, not seawater, because they were worried about the wall. They were worried about the wall breaking.
Right.
So we were watching as far back as Canal Street on the 1 and 9, because they were setting up pumps, possibly. So Transit had a pumping train going in on the 1 and 9 north, coming in south to the tower. So that train was pumping the water out, and then eventually they sealed that tunnel as far back as Canal Street, as far back as Chambers
Okay.
on the 1 and 9. It was in about 200 feet. I walked right up to it and touched it. That was a short time after September 11th. So they were sealing these tunnels because they didn't know where the water was coming from.
Yeah.
They were sealing them, and it's on a video documented with the Transit documentary. And so that was with Transit News.
Okay.
The full documentation is on the internet. And so, and different points of that. So this is what the beginning, and so over time, you're coming in and coming out of the site.
Yeah.
You're coming in, Transit was doing massive stuff.
Sure.
So there was stuff going on simultaneously that what we were involved in, and getting back to these vents, after we were done cleaning them out, we then closed them up with wood. So on some of these pictures I have, I'm out of my, I would always wear a white tie and neck suit. So on this particular one right here, this particular one, I was with my supervisor, Steve Natowitz, and here is that's me.
Steve.
That's Steve right above me.
Okay.
That's Steve Natowitz,
Yeah.
that's me.
Yeah.
He photographed that picture. These pictures here. This picture here, and on one of them, I
Is
don't.
that the debris you were saying you walked up and touched? Or that's
Well,
a different...
that's under the site. That's
Right.
something else.
Right, that's something. Okay.
That's on 528. I think
Okay.
it's logged on
Okay.
on the picture somewhere. I can't remember. So that particular time, what I would always wear a white tie vet suit. So this particular time is on a 1 and 9 on Cortland, I believe.
Okay.
Right. So this is a 528, I think, of 2002.
Okay.
It's documented. I don't know on that particular picture, but it's documented
Sure.
in the pictures I have.
Okay.
So he photographed them. He photographed that picture. He photographed that picture. I photographed that picture. I photographed that picture.
Okay.
And
And
so
those are closer to the day of.
yeah,
That's not 5. That's like, this is like September 13, 14, 15.
in that
That's-
range.
Okay,
Right,
got it.
right.
Yeah, all right.
And so
Yeah.
he explained to me, in case in future, here it is. Here's what you were involved in. So
Got it.
this particular picture was involved in. I was involved in later on what they call was access and protection. So around the whole site, coming closer to the individual site, up above on the individual site with the vent gratings, I would actually open up the vent gratings themselves, and people would come in behind me. And I'm not sure today, there was a private contractor that would come in and do other stuff, because we were over by the building that was right over here, the Deutsche
Deutsche
building.
Bank.
And right at the bottom, there was a bank vault
Oh,
at the bottom.
Yeah.
So there was no Bank of Nova Scotia on the site.
Right.
So one night, me and my friend, co-worker Frank Lyon, missed the revenue trucks leaving. So there was massive stuff going on simultaneously.
Sure.
So and on these things, access and protection, I would open up with Steve. That's why I didn't have my white tie back suit on. I would open them up, and then actually these other people would go in and look for possible pathological waste around closer in the site. And so, other than that, I wasn't privy to what they were doing.
sure. Can I ask you something, Alan? You mentioned pathological waste. Is that a term
That's
technical
body.
to...
That's body parts.
So that's- okay. So
that's
that's
trained-
not building. That's
No, pathological waste is a term.
Biological.
Biological.
Okay.
And so,
With search and rescue, right?
Right. The
Because he
kind of...
was part of
Oh,
that.
okay. Wow. So
So-
this is something you received prior to 9/11, or this
these
is,
are
this
these
is
are these are
after?
training. These are training that they train you for.
They do. Okay.
Because training, transit is all about training.
Right.
Transit's also providing enough information so that their workers are safe.
Right.
Because their safety is number one rule.
Absolutely.
So they always want you to be safe. So in the very beginning, to understand a snapshot, I only started transit. And they always said, remember when you started, because you always need it for future reference. I started working for transit November 13, 2000.
Wow.
I never even cleared my 1-year probation.
Wow.
So that goes to tell you
Yeah.
what I was
Yeah.
about.
But still fresh.
And so
Yeah.
my plumbing career, I snap into
Yeah.
I snap into a different mode
Yeah.
because it's been explained to me I have emergency.
Right.
You know, when you get into different levels of it.
Was that part of your job title when you were hired with MTA? You were hired as an emergency response plumber, or was that just like part of? That wasn't explicitly on your job title. That was just part of the.
When you're trained,
Yeah.
when you actually start work for transit,
Right.
you have to endure a training. They send you to the training facility. It's called track training classes.
Okay.
Track training classes are they teach you about the colors, they teach you about lights, they teach you about flags, they teach you about the track.
Okay.
And so what that's all about is that's all about your training. So when you're in front of a train and you stop a train, that's all what we do.
Okay.
And so it's all safety.
Got it.
Safety.
From the go.
Safety from the get-go.
Got it.
So they make sure you're safe. You want to go home safe. Your family goes home safe. Everything's about safety.
Right.
Number one priority with transit authority.
Great.
So that's how it works.
Right.
So going forward, once you pass that, then your plumbing background kicked into where you would be deployed to. So I always picked what they said was from a seniority point, you pick a location where you want to work out of, your time and everything else like that. So that's a periodically thing of where you deploy out of.
Okay.
So I was always out of 14th and 6th, and then eventually years later, 2005, I switched over to West 4th Street as a fire inspector.
Oh, okay.
And,
Wow.
and a fire inspector with transit, what I was doing was you would test the integrities of the fire line that are on the stations from street level to where the fire boxes are on the stations, on the platforms. So you would test miles of the integrity of the fire lines so the fire department is secure.
They know they're good.
So they're good.
Right.
So
Right.
and it's the same thing with a building. There's standpipes that are in the stairwells, and so when you look at high-rise buildings, how does the water get up to the top floor?
Right.
Well, it's the same way. Water gets pumped up to the roofs, and then it comes back down.
Right.
So it's all on pressure. So this is massive part of the plumbing end. So that's where my expertise comes in.
So still working very much in the plumbing, like
Field.
with in the field, but
Yes.
even though you are a fire inspector, it's still very
In that
yeah.
field, that's what I was deployed working
to
in,
do.
and that was out of West 4th
Got
Street.
it. And that was 2005.
Yeah,
that you made
approximately
that change.
2006,
Okay.
2006.
Okay.
So in the earlier years, I was after 9/11 and going forward, I then moved over to from 12 to 8. I then went from 4 to 12. I switched, and so then at that point, my superintendent asked me to get my CDL license, and then I got my CDL license, and then I was driving the vac truck.
okay.
I became a driver.
That was after
9/11.
That was after 9. Okay.
So going back into this time frame,
Sure.
I was driving the vac truck.
Okay.
I went out of the back seat and I went to the front seat as a plumber in
Yeah.
the vehicle
To now
to
being
the
the
driver.
driver, right.
So now the driver maintains the vehicle.
Sure.
So in the vehicle, the overhead is the vacuum, and so now number one, you always have to worry about, as sad as it sounds, needles.
Right.
What happens? This is the public.
Right. Right.
So these are the training that they train you. So there's a lot of stuff that they train you purposely. So contaminations. What when somebody gets hit by a train,
Right.
blood, airborne.
Right,
This
right,
this
right.
is what they train you.
Right.
Constantly training. So this is what I was involved in. So on the 13th, going 14th and 15th, and then for years out, we were still involved in it for years. And so that's what transit was in. Even I was coming back and forth for years, going around the whole site.
Yeah.
So in transit, we were sealing the tunnels, and so once that the vac truck was come above,
Yeah.
and then
Out, yeah.
the train was coming in on the tunnels,
Yeah.
and then pulling water out, and they were sealing that tunnel. Now all of a sudden they were sealing it, if the water mains broke or anything,
Right.
it would hit that,
Right.
and it wouldn't go far
Contained,
out.
yeah.
It would contain, exactly right.
Right, okay.
And so they were sealing it through the tunnels.
Right. So just so I'm clear, Alan, the general scope of your work from September 13th through the 15th really is clearing the drains, helping seal those tunnels to make sure that there isn't any kind of...
What I was involved in was in the vents.
It was much more in the vents.
I was involved with the vents, and I was explained to save history,
Right.
which I did,
Yeah.
and also explain the history of what others were involved in.
Absolutely.
And so, when I received that medallion, the time frame in that beam that's downstairs,
Sure.
I was going to sign that
The last column. Yes.
with my supervisor, Steve Nettles. And I was gonna sign that beam, because he asked me in that time frame. Because we were doing round the clock on overtime and everything.
Yeah.
He said, let's go down to the last beam. I said, nope, not me. He says, let's go sign the beam. Nope, not me. And because I would have signed MTA and my name, I couldn't do it. And the reason for it is I still feel today, it's like signing a tombstone
Sure.
of people that perished.
Sure.
This site is a grave site.
Yeah.
And so it is very, very personal to me on many levels. And to explain it even further, on events around St. Paul's Church, I climbed into the vent gratings years later,
Yeah. Oh wow.
next to the
The
gravesite.
actual gravestones.
So next to, I climbed in clearing drains later on. So there's a lot of history with that. So, and going in nights after the history, what happened was I would go over to St. Paul's Church and pray. And what I would do on the nights, because I was 12 midnight to 8 a.m.
Right.
And this was extremely key to me to getting a lot of strength in one aspect was George Washington had a religious pew there. I would stay to the religious pew to the right, and I would be crying my eyes out, gathering strength, and praying to say what would happen if we were in George Washington times.
Right.
We'd be having a different conversation today.
Right.
And so that being said, it was pulling me up. And so on several times at the symposium when they would do the 10th for the 11th,
Voices, yeah.
on different meeting and greeting different people, I would gather information on it to gather strength from the people that perished and learning their stories. I became friendly with Anadula Kasmatesis, learning about her brother. One of my good friends, Brian Barry, his mother died. So, and also Steve Olson, one of the firemen died. And so, Staten Island, where I grew up, there was a lot of tragedy, but there were human beings. And everybody has a story. So when you go outside your site, I would tell people, look on the site. And those are the people that, in my own way, in my own vision, when you understand how many people perished, put a picture to the face and look at the people walking the site. It is massive. It is massive. And that is, we would always come in from different angles.
Right.
From West Street coming across.
Right.
And so there's so many details in the details.
Absolutely.
And so this is what is extremely important.
Yeah.
And so to come forward, you can't just have this kind of conversation
Right.
in 2 minutes.
Right.
And then explain all of this. And I don't want to sound like I'm just the, how do I explain it correctly? I'm just the author in my autobiography. And explaining my point of view, what I was humbly and gratefully part of America's finest and greatest going into the site of rescue, recovery, and cleanup. And so these are what America sent in massive, massive, massive human beings. And we were involved in trying to locate people. And so that's what was going on.
Wow, powerful. Thank you again for
You're welcome.
sharing that.
You're welcome.
I guess my next question really is, like, you know, I know the first days after the attacks are probably, you know, the most trying and difficult for you because the devastation is so much around you, still very much present. I'm curious, after the 15th, how often did you find yourself back down here? Or like, I mean, I'm obviously
constantly,
doing checkups.
constantly,
Okay, so
constantly. We were constantly because what happened was it never stopped.
Right, right.
It never stopped
Yeah.
because the site is so massive.
Right, right.
The site is just so massive. People are just focusing on the one area. And the one area, we were coming in through tunnels.
Right.
And so the tunnels, and the only way to explain it is when you look at a picture of the subway system, that's how massive transit is. It's the best way to explain it. And you're looking at a small dot on the map. I'm looking at the map.
Right. Right.
Now transit had massive stuff going on, so it never stops.
Right. Right.
So they diverted the trains around the site.
I was wondering.
So how do people get to work?
Right.
How do people get back to the site? And so transit was supplying buses. Transit was supplying buses for the police and the fire and different things for people to come down and go back and forth. I had one evening when I was driving a small dump truck. I had one evening, I believe it was a detective. He flashed his badge and he got into my small dump truck I was driving. And so it's just countless and countless and countless of stories. Subway, the restaurant right down the block here. Subway giving free food to first responders. And on one evening in the Bowling Green train station, Bowling Green, the park, in a little park right at the foot of. One evening I walked over there with one of my coworkers, Michael Muscarello, and me and him walked over there because we actually we were doing stuff going over to the Bowling Green station and then come back. Well, we got dropped off, and the people that would drop us off, they went north to another situation. So then me and him walked over to the downtown Marriott Hotel. I had the full gear on. I walked in, I took the first step of my white tie-back suit on. And because it was explained to me that there was stuff going on upstairs. So I walked into the building, and I said, wait a second, I can't do this, you know? And I walked in, and I turned around, and I stepped. And so that's one spot. Another spot in the aftermath, this here, this is downstairs today. If you look on the street, this particular picture is when me and Frank Ryan were coming in on Church Street, on the tunnels, on the train line, coming in.
This is the World Trade Center.
This is World Trade Center. This is downstairs today.
Currently, yeah.
Still.
Yeah.
Currently underneath Vesey Street and Chambers. That's the token booth. Here's the identification of the marks. So, and the clock that was here, that was very important to me. So I snapped a picture knowing that there could be a relative of somebody looking for somebody.
Sure.
I didn't know.
You didn't know. Yeah.
I didn't know. And so I walked past here. The reason why we were there, we were involved in, he was involved with drainage and ventilation. So there were pumps down below. So right past there was glass doors. And in those glass doors, then there was a small, probably 20 or 30 feet, and another set of glass doors. And in between the first set and the second set, I then stopped. And I said, he videoed it. He videoed it. And he took pictures. And I said, I looked over, and I looked to my right, and I saw blood handprints on the wall. Blood handprints saying, don't go in. Marked in blood. And so I stopped. I looked at him. He says, come on, let's go in. I said, okay. We walked past the second double doors, opened up the doors, we walked in, and it was massive, massive stuff flying.
Really?
Massive stuff. I knew in my head that it was contamination all over. And what I had, I didn't have enough. Because going back to the contamination, on the night of the 13th, the night of the 13th, what happens is when you wear the white Tyvek suit. The Tyvek suit, it's like right now you have skin right here. So white Tyvek suit is an insulator. So it's an insulator here between you and the outside layer. So I would always wear the white Tyvek suit. It's part of the training. So because you always have to worry about other stuff. So that's what protected me. It insulated me. So the night of that, I went through 2 sets of cartridges because I would wear a half. They call it a half full face cartridge. The half full face cartridge is a cartridge that you're certified with Transit Authority and also OSHA and everything because of what conditions you're going to.
Right.
They have to provide for safety. So I had my full half face cartridge mask plus the cartridges.
Right.
The cartridges under OSHA regulations are designed for X amount of hours under X amount of whatever you're going into.
Right.
Asbestos, they're designed.
Yeah.
So I went through them, which means they were clogged.
Right.
I went through 2 sets that should have been good for 16 hours. I went through in 3 hours.
Wow.
And so the night of the 13th, when I was on the vents, and then all of a sudden, I couldn't breathe no more. I took it off.
Okay.
So what happened was on the night of the 13th, I took it off, and then what happened was I then was looking up. I stopped for a moment, and I'm looking up. I could literally feel the air being sucked up.
Wow.
It was like
Through the.
it was like inside of a tornado. And that was like my experience. So looking up, because you felt it being pulled up. You felt it. A lot of stuff was going on simultaneously. And the morning of the 14th is
The one
that
that-
picture.
Oh, this
So-
from the Staten
So,
Island
so
Transit.
that particular picture is me and my person that I was working with, co-worker John Massamarino. We were over at the City Hall, Brooklyn Bridge. So we were doing stuff farther there in the night from 12 a.m. till we did it like from 12 to 8, and then from 8 to 12 again. And so we walked over to the Trade Center here.
Yeah.
So we were walking down, all of a sudden we got to Church Street, and I'm looking up, and as I'm looking up, I'm like, what's all that noise? I hear people screaming and talking and yelling. I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. So he says, we got to get back to where we were. I said, okay, fine. So we walked over and made a right, and then the next block up is the church.
Right.
I forget the
Not St. Paul's.
the next,
other one.
The next one on Park. Is that
Trinity?
Park? Yes.
On Park. Oh, I don't know which one.
I forget the next
Yeah,
one up.
but I know which one you're talking
And
about.
so
I see.
that's another story. But I was walking, and so I didn't have my Tyvek suit, and you could see I didn't have a mask because I
Right.
didn't have a
It's
mask.
clogged up, and
I didn't have a mask.
Right. Did
So-
you discard the respirator after it was like? Did you kind of know in the moment this is useless? It's getting clogged. Like it's no good.
I
Or
didn't have it.
You just didn't have it on.
Didn't
you?
have it.
Okay.
So these are all part of. If you ask me questions today, ask me questions, and I will tell you the answers because what has people learned,
Right.
right? What have you learned?
Right.
Well, I'll give you a perspective from a first responder, right? If you learn from what a first responder needs, respirators, cartridges, and everything else that should be on site, you know, because once you take that breathing apparatus off,
Right.
and it's
You're-
like you
yeah,
went to
you're
war.
defenseless.
It's like you went to war with 6 bullets.
Right.
And so after the bullets are out, you're by yourself. It's kind of like that same theory.
Absolutely.
So, and the same thing, you needed something to protect yourself. So I had something.
Right. The
So,
mask.
so on the mask. So I do have nodule on my lung. I have a nodule on my pancreas, and I'm lucky to be alive. You know, and I'm lucky to be alive. I'm lucky to explain what I saw, what I was involved in, and what other people did. And so I am very proud. My father served in the United States Navy, as I mentioned before. We do things a little differently in my family, you know, and so, you know, it's how I was brought up. You know, go do what you got to do and come back. That's it.
Right.
And so the medallion, as Mario Galvin explained the medallion, that was given to me by Tony Utano a while back in down the hall. And what that's about is that is showing on the medallion how he showed what it was all about and what it came about and what everything meant.
Right.
Is all part of the history.
Right.
What everybody was involved.
Right.
It's not just one person.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so it's all about, as I mentioned earlier, about if you looked at a concert and looked at how many pieces of the instrument, it's a similar kind of analogy. And when you look at that, it's like how many people perished, how many people went in. Now how many people are left with the trauma? So how many people now are left with the trauma? Now all of a sudden you go to a next stage. And so now the next stage is, where are you in all the laws that are in place?
Yeah.
Like with me in transit, I had to follow the laws that are existing.
Right.
And so the laws that are existing brings me to what we are here today. You know, and so how do you go out injured in the line of duty? And so these are all laws that are in place, but not because of a terrorism injured in the line of duty.
Right.
And so that needs to be discussed.
Right.
If you ask me what needs to be changed. And so these are questions that are real questions. So when there is another, people are now safe.
Right.
There is a way, because in the very beginning, looking backwards, I learned, because now the people, the family members of the perished, they congregate at certain spots. Well, every year on the anniversary, they congregate across the street in the park. They're all, it's a very traumatic. Those people will never ever get peace.
Right.
They will try, but never get peace. They will try, because their loved ones were taken off the earth.
Right.
So now, as many levels of grieving, I learned, because there was prayer stations on board. There was clergy walking the site. There was people walking the site to give you shirts, sneakers, anything for comfort.
Make sure you're good. Yeah.
People hugging and crying, because nobody. It was raw human emotion, and that's as close as it gets.
Wow.
Close as it gets.
If I may, Alan, if I could go back a second, I just thinking about the medal, it is amazing that TWU came up with this way to honor these stories, for those who are no longer with us, and also those who have sacrificed as much as you.
Could I just stop you there?
Sure.
In the very beginning, in the very beginning of the ceremony that they did for
the
you,
medals. Yeah.
in the very beginning of it, what they do at the Union Hall is people will announce people's names that have perished. And so I was announcing several people's names, because that's part of
the ceremony.
what they do at the hall. So we were showing you what they do, and several people that had passed. And so there's just thousands of people. And so every agency has the same situation. And so that's the bigger story.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so 14th Street and 6th Avenue was closed off. And so in this album here of pictures of 14th and 6th, you'll see this is
Now, Carmine, he made this.
He made this photo.
Did he give it to? He gave it to you to.
He gave this
also
photo.
share?
He gave this to me to. I have it somewhere. I'd have to find it. This is 14th and 6th right now, and these are the pictures that he highlighted. There's the Trade Center
On fire. Yeah.
on fire. So these are the albums on different pictures that what he did, what he was highlighting as it was unfolding. And in this booklet, there is. I just have a little last. Oh no. And so in this booklet, there is the vac truck, and
Oh, good. Oh, really?
in here, showing the vac truck,
Yeah.
showing the state police guarding off 14th and 6th.
Yeah.
State police.
Yeah.
That was it. State police.
Was that because it was a hub for transit that they
Transit has
they
an
were being
emergency
protected?
response
Oh, okay.
down below.
Got it. Okay.
That's where I deployed at 14th and 6th.
Right.
Their hub down below.
Right. But that's why they had it cordoned off.
14th and 6th is
Yeah.
like a main kind of thing.
That's the main thing. Okay.
So,
that's why.
so
Yeah, main
transit
one.
would be deployed out of 14th and 6th.
Right.
Emergency response. That's one of several throughout the whole city slate.
Got it.
State.
Yeah.
So that's just focused here.
Right.
So, and so the vac truck is in those pictures.
Sure.
And so one of the vac trucks eventually that I drove
Sure.
is in those pictures. But I was on that vac truck and different ones, because you can tell by the numbers on the side.
Got it.
And so these are the things that people were involved in.
Right.
And so that's the bigger story.
Absolutely.
Learning from what everybody was involved in.
Absolutely. If I could turn back to your story a little bit, Alan, I'm just, you told me you stayed on the job well after 9/11. I mean, obviously to, change roles and everything with MTA. I'm just curious, you qualify for this pin in the medal because you were injured in the line of duty. Did that did your illnesses or your injuries appear immediately, or was it something that gradually appeared? Like, did it force your retirement at all, or having to?
It's a very slippery slope because everybody has, as a first responder, as I was explaining to you, it's like watching a movie. You can go, boop, turn it off, I can't.
Yeah.
And so, raw emotions for me is panic attacks. So panic attacks, I can no longer sit in front of a train now because I can stop trains, can't do it no more.
Right.
So it's part of the job to say I can't do it and accept it and say I can't do it and fall on your knees and say, you know, give it to God and what will be will be.